It's been 55 years since Status Quo released their third studio album, Mark Kelly's Greasy Spoon. Released in 1970, the album failed to chart in the UK at the time, but it did mark a turning point in the band's career because this was the point where they decided not to do the psychedelic pop and surrounding genres they'd been doing previously and go more towards blues and hard rock. They were still on the Pi label. This was, as I say, their third album. They would release another album a year later, Dog of Two Head. But Mark Kelly's Greasy Spoon is something of an underrated classic because, yeah, it's a band trying to experiment with many different things. We have things like Spinning Wheel Blues on here, sort of your standard bluesy, shuffly type thing. You've got Daughter, a little bit heavy, but also with a tiny look back in production of what they'd been doing previously while still having very loud riffs going on there. You've got Shy Fly, sort of a different direction again. April, Spring, Summer and Wednesdays, a track which I think is a favourite of many a fan, especially when it was played on the Frantic Four reunion tour. You have Junior's Wailing, the Steamhammer cover, which became the opening to many a Quo concert during the 1970s. Quo really putting their stamp on a cover version. Then you have Lucky Lady, that sort of acoustic-y thing, which is a little bit more funky. You know, this really is a band in the middle of experimentation. Need Your Love, another Rossi Young after April Spring, which has that sort of chugging element, but it takes time in getting there. Daisy Polka Blues, a Fleetwood Mac, Peter Green cover, very much faithful to the original. And then the Alan Lancaster penned Is It Really Me, Gotta Go Home, which again was a staple in early Quo concerts, mainly because once you get into Gotta Go Home, they could go anywhere. They could experiment with different things, try different kind of solos and stuff. And that's exactly what you get on here. I'm sure however many takes they did, none of them were exactly the same. You know, it was all systems go at this point. But wait a minute. In talking about Mark Kelly's Greasy Spoon, I have missed out one track in the track listing. Can you tell me which one? Well, this track is one that I'm sure was skipped after the second play of the album because it doesn't really fit stylistically. But then if you think about how varied this album is in terms of the different styles, none of it particularly fits together. It sounds like the same band but just doing different directions. But this one, Everything, written by Francis Rossi and Rick Parfitt, is a complete kind of different area altogether, possibly their gentlest song that they ever recorded, and a little bit of a remnant from that previous sort of pop psychedelic material. Think of things like Are You Growing Tired of My Love, for example. You know, Rick's sort of in a similar vocal mode here. And the reason why I say maybe fans skipped it a lot back in the day and perhaps it doesn't have the appreciation it deserves is because it has kind of a laid-back vibe that doesn't really go with the image of Quo as a band. It's sort of, when you think of Quo, you're waiting for those shuffles or, you know, a little bit of a hard rock thing. So this laid-back ballad thing doesn't really fit. I'm sure it has its fans, and I want to kind of pay tribute to it here because I do think it is a bit of an unappreciated classic that in later years it kind of helps lay the foundation for the other side of Status Quo, the other side, the the thing that isn't just heads down, no nonsense boogie. Those album tracks that you have, like All the Reasons, for example, or A Year on Pile Driver, which have something different about them. If you played it to somebody and said, guess the band, without, them knowing any Status Quo connection, they probably would say someone else. They wouldn't say Status Quo. Maybe, Francis or Rick's vocal might give it away, but stylistically, it doesn't fit with the kind of associated sound of Quo. And that's one of the reasons why I love them, because everybody goes, well, they all sound the same. Well, to me, they've done things like, as I say, All the Reasons, A Year, Where I Am, Living on an Island, and Everything. They've gone outside of that box. They've tried different things. And I've listened to Everything a few times today because I was also one of those people who skipped it because I found it kind of boring. But listening to it, it is gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. Because what you've got is immediately, and this might just be the versions I've heard, but immediately you get that kind of hiss of the tape where they've probably turned it up a little bit, just a little bit of intimacy going on there. You can hear sort of the frets on the guitar, the acoustic guitar, that just going through two notes and changing the notes ever so slightly. Then you've got that cello that comes in. It's very much in the mold of the kind of thing that they were doing on Spare Parts, but not with this level of subtlety. And John Schroeder's production at this point is a little bit crisper. I kind of find sometimes that with the 60s stuff, when they were in that psychedelic mold, it sort of has a hazy feeling, almost like it's a bit sort of soupy and very much in one track, whereas this is a little bit more separated out. There's more clarity, and certainly with the other music that they were recording at the same time, you get that same thing because you're hearing the guitars a lot more. Roy Lines is still in the band at this point, but the keyboards have been turned down a little bit, haven't they? It's much more of a guitar focused sound. So with Everything, you've got the acoustic guitar, which sort of has those 2 or 3 notes during that first section. And then when we get to I Hear the Dawn is Breaking, we get more of a staccato effect. It's sort of acting more like an orchestra. And this is something I think that could be orchestrated with a much bigger intensity. Imagine it, different strings and violins all coming out and playing this. And yet it's just this acoustic guitar doing it. Maybe there's 2 there. I'm not sure, because during that first section, we have different stuff. Again, you can hear all the frets going on, all the fretting. And what we have is that cello over the top, and then Rick's vocal. Francis has said in recent years how Rick, certainly in the early times, had this sort of, he would be very good at singing these ballads, things like All the Reasons and Where I Am and Living on an Island. Like, he just had it. It was just this sort of softness that he could bring to such a thing. And I think Everything probably could have benefited even more by backing vocals, but also it doesn't really need it. The simplicity is the beauty in this. There was a YouTube video years ago that put a much heavier arrangement behind Everything, and it did work. But I do think that the simplicity here is the key, and the sensitivity. As I say, it's probably the gentlest song that they ever recorded, and it doesn't really outstay its welcome because it's around 2.5 minutes long. If they'd extended it out a little bit, then it might have felt like, well, it really is outstaying its welcome here. But sandwiched in between Daughter, that sort of heavy thing where everything is all in, and then Shy Fly, which is a little bit more laid back, but with riffs in there, and it's another underrated classic, and that is what Kelly's is. It's an underrated classic. There's so much experimentation going on here, but every one, it's kind of interesting to see. And tracks like Spinning Wheel Blues and April, Spring, Summer and Wednesdays have had whole new lives because they've been played live by the band, either during the Frantic Four or even a little bit of experimentation with, as we'd call the modern band. Francis Rossi has played those two tracks on the solo tours that he's been doing in recent years. Perfect for that acoustic vibe. I know that Rick sang Everything, the song, and I know that it kind of has him written all over it in terms of the styling and stuff. But I would like to see, as the co-writer of this track, Francis Rossi, maybe give his interpretation of it. I think that would be really cool. What do you think of Everything, which was the B-side to Mean Girl? So technically, if you're in the school of thought that B-sides also chart, even if they're not a double A side, then technically it was a hit single. What do you think? Let me know all your thoughts on Everything and, everything to do with Mark Kelly's Greasy Spoon in the comments below.